You must stop affirming at once. If this one silent sentence is still alive within you, then understand this clearly. It is not that you lack discipline. It is not that you fail to imagine. And it is certainly not that the law has failed you. Something else is voiding your prayer. You enter the state at night. You feel it real. You taste its fulfillment. And then, without knowing it, you abandon it the very next morning. Not through doubt, not through fear, but through a single quiet confession spoken inwardly. You say, let us see what happens. And in that moment, you step out of the assumption and back into the waiting. Now, let us examine exactly how this happens. You are not careless, you are not lazy, and you are certainly not indifferent to your desire. I know this because you return to it again and again, night after night, carrying it with sincerity into the silence. You imagine faithfully. You feel sincerely. You fall asleep believing you have done the work. And in that moment, you truly have. Yet something subtle happens when the night gives way to morning. Not a collapse, not a rebellion, but a quiet shift in posture. You rise, you move, you begin your day, and without realizing it, you stand outside the state you entered only hours before. You do not deny it. You do not argue against it. You simply stop being it. This is why effort has become your refuge. You tell yourself you must repeat the imaginal act, reaffirm the assumption, correct the feeling, and so you return again at night, believing the work must be done once more. But this repetition is not devotion. It is compensation. Understand this clearly. If imagining were the problem, repetition would solve it. If discipline were lacking, force would repair it. But the law does not fail between night and morning. The failure, if it may be called that, occurs in a far quieter place. It occurs not in imagination, but in identity. And until this posture is seen, no amount of effort will ever feel complete. Now we come to the confession itself. Not a violent denial, not an emotional outburst, but a sentence so calm, so sensible, that it passes unnoticed. It sounds harmless. It sounds mature. It even sounds prudent. And yet, it is the very moment the state is surrendered. You do not say, this is impossible. That would be fear. Instead, you say something far quieter. You say, let us see what happens, for we shall see if it works. Observe what has taken place. In that instant, you are no longer occupying the state. You have stepped outside it to audit it. You have moved from being to checking. This sentence is not doubt in its crude form. It is doubt disguised as wisdom. It is lack of faith dressed as caution. And because it feels responsible, you never arrest it. You allow it to pass, and with it the state passes as well. You imagine at night as one who has entered, but you rise in the morning as one who is evaluating. And evaluation is not faith. Evaluation is separation. This is why the law seems inconsistent to you, not because it responds slowly, but because it responds immediately to the posture you adopt. And here, the posture has changed. Here is where the matter becomes uncomfortable. For this sentence does not merely interrupt the state, it exposes the role you have assumed within it. When you say, let us see what happens, you are no longer living from the assumption, you are placing it on trial. In that moment, you cease to be the operant power. You become an examiner, a judge, one who stands apart and demands evidence before acceptance. You believe you are being careful, reasonable, even humble, yet the posture you have adopted is neither patience nor wisdom. It is authority misplaced. For the one who owns a thing does not wait to see if it belongs to him. He moves within it naturally, without commentary, without inspection. Only the one who doubts his possession pauses to observe, to measure, to verify. You would never sit in your own home saying, "Let us see if this is really my house." The thought would never arise. It would be absurd. And yet this is precisely what you do with every fulfilled state you enter and then quietly abandon. I tell you plainly, you are the operant power. But the operant power does not test the law. The operant power moves the law by occupancy. The moment you wait for proof, you have stepped down from authorship. You have placed the law where you imagine it must perform for you. And the law, obedient as it is, responds not to your words, but to your position. You asked the mirror to show you a reflection before you offered it a face. And so you cease to be. Now you will understand why it feels as though nothing ever carries forward, why progress seems real at night, yet absent by morning. It is not because the seed has failed, it is because you never allowed the time to begin. Every imaginal act has its own appointed hour. It has an interval of gestation, but this interval can only flow when the state is left undisturbed. The moment you rise and say inwardly, "Let us see what happens," you do something most never notice. You do not merely wait, you return to the starting line. You turn back the clock to the precise moment before the prayer was accepted. And so the process does not continue. It restarts. This is why repetition feels necessary to you. You imagine again, not because the first act was weak, but because you quietly canceled its momentum. Each night becomes day one. Each morning, the clock is set back to zero. This is not punishment. It is precision. The law does not punish hesitation. It mirrors it. When you suspend your conviction, the movement of the bridge of incidents is also suspended. This is what I call the Sabbath. Not effort, not striving, but cessation. The deep inner knowing that the time for labor is over. And where there is no rest, there is no unfolding. The correction is simple, but it must be ruthless. You do not gently ignore the sentence. You do not negotiate with it. The moment you attempt to debate logic with logic, you have already lost your footing. When the impulse arises to say, "Let us see what happens," you must stop it mid-sentence. Do not complete the thought. Do not follow it into the labyrinth of explanation. Arrest it at once. You do this not with effort, but with authority. As one slams a door on an uninvited guest, there is no discussion with a closed door. It is shut because the matter is settled. In its place, do not scramble to find a new affirmation. Simply assume the feeling of relief, the relief of having arrived, the quiet satisfaction that asks no question because it already knows the answer. This is not indifference. It is ownership. One who has eaten a full meal does not check the menu again. One who has truly entered does not stand watching the threshold. Remain where you have entered. Do not descend again into the role of the tester. And if silence follows, let it be the silence of fulfillment. Now, let us go into the silence.